how you doing out there, Guitar Heroes? All right, well, we're going to be talking about an introduction to the key of D major. Now, the first thing is that all of the major keys have, at least as a basic structure, they have 7 chords. And that's what we're going to be talking about today, is the 7 chords that are in the key of D major. What does that mean? It just means that those chords go together, they sound good together. As opposed to a different key, an E or a G or whatever. And all the notes all the chords aren't specific to each individual major keys. There's crossover. So in other words, you might find a G chord in the key of C, you might find it in the key of A, and you might find it in other keys as well. And these are all basic chords that we're going to talk about today, but the main thing here is what are the chords in that key of D, and when you're in the key of D, then what chord should I expect? Okay, so let's zoom in and check things out. Okay, now let's take a look at the chord structure, which will kind of help you with a little bit of chord theory to some extent. All right, so hopefully you can get all the letters on here. So the musical alphabet, there's 7 chords in every key. There's 7 notes in the major scale. Those would be individual notes. So if you can see this, okay, I've got A through G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Now we're in the key of D in this case, so to determine what are the chords in this key, we start by numbering, and you can see the numbers I have on the bottom. So D is the key and the primary, our first chord, and each one of the numbers then represent how you would determine which would be the other major chords, the minor chords, and then of course the 7th chord, which in this case is one that we're not going to really spend any time on. So take a look at the D chord. Right below it you see a 1. So as we count out, E being 2, F being 3, G being 4, G is the first other major chord. So the 1 chord is D, the 4 chord is G, and then if we keep going, on the other side we see 5, the 5 chord is A. So this is really common. In every key, the 1, 4, 5 chords are generally the majors in that key. Then the minors, you can see I got an M, a little M indication on the bottom. You can see that the 2 chord is an E minor, because that chord, the 2 chord is always a minor. The 3 chord is a minor. It's an F minor in this case. And then we have the 4 chord, which we've already talked about, and then A, the 5 chord, and then you can see that the 6 chord is B minor, and C is a diminished chord, and we're not even going to mess with that because that's used very, very rarely. Today we just want to focus on the majors. Keep in mind that there's flats and sharps in between these, but these are the major ones, and this is a good way to understand the theory of chord structure and the way that the keys are developed. Okay, so let's go through these chords and make sure that we know them well and can maybe play through something similar to what I did at the beginning. That was just an example of playing through all the chords so you could hear what they sound like. Okay, so the first chord's D. And hopefully you're already familiar with this chord, but if you're not, there's the zoom in. And we've got the first finger here is going to be on the 2nd fret. Hopefully you know that these are the frets here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then the strings. Little E on this end, big E on this end. So we're going to start with the pointer finger on the 3rd string up from the bottom. It's going to be in the 2nd fret. Okay? And then the 2nd finger is going to be on the 1st string. It's going to be in the same fret, the 2nd fret. And then the 3rd finger goes on the 3rd fret on the string that's in between those two, which is the B string. And that's our D chord. Now we don't want to play the big E. We don't want to play that one, so I lay my thumb on top here, so you can't hear that. And then I'll move this finger once in a while just to give it a little bit of rhythm. You have to do it on the strum though. Of course that makes a different chord, right? Okay. Okay, so the next chord that we have, the 2 chord, is an E minor. Now you should be familiar with this. This is probably one of the easiest chords because it's just 2 fingers. Okay, so we're still in that 2nd fret. Now we're one string down from the big E, and then 1 more string down. And this is my recommended way to play it, and I'll show you why here just in a second. Now in this case we can strum all the strings because it's an E minor and the big string is an E, so that fits. So if you were going to go to the next chord, which is a G, oh I'm sorry, we got the F sharp minor, let's go to that. Well, let's just skip that for a second. E minor to G, my 2-finger version of a G, is really 2 good starter chords. 2-finger chords. And then if you like Elvis, you'd be able to do this with those 2 chords. Right off the bat. So 2 chords can make some pretty good music. So that's the E minor chord and the G chord, at least the 2-finger one anyway. You know, normally you're going to do the 3-finger. We'll get that in just a second. Okay, so the next chord, the 3 chord, because you're gonna hear this nomenclature all the time. You're gonna hear people say, oh, the 5th, the 4th, the 3rd. What are they talking about? They're talking about these numbers that go with either the individual notes in the major scale, or they're going with these chords. If they say the 5th chord, then we know by the chart over here that that's A. The 5th chord's an A. And in this case, it's an A, but the 5th chord could be something else. But that's the whole point, that nomenclature really gets confusing when you're not really sure what they're talking about. Okay, so the next chord is an F sharp minor. I don't know how to play this song, or this chord. I don't know how to play this chord without using a bar chord. Okay, so I got a whole lesson on bar chords, so I'm not going to spend a whole bunch of time on it, but I'm laying my bar here on the 2nd fret, and I try to stay above the frets. As with all chords, you stay close to the fret as you can, on the bottom, as close as you can, without getting on top of it. And then I'm going to take this E minor form with these 2 fingers, and then I'm going to slide those up too, and then lay the bar down on the 2nd. And that gives us an F sharp minor. Back to D, E minor, back to D. Now you can hear how those chords so nicely go together, and it really doesn't matter what order you play them, they sound great because they're all in the same key. That's really the issue here. So that's F sharp minor. G. So just for a little grins here, so to speak. So we've got the 1-finger G, and I'm going to hold down the 1st string on the 3rd fret, but I can only play 4 strings here. That's the 1-finger G. 2-finger G is when I put my 2nd finger up here on that same 3rd fret. Now the second string, you got the big E, and then you have this next one. That's muted on purpose. When this thing comes across, it touches that string, and it mutes it, and that's on purpose because I don't have this finger down, right? So that's the 2-finger. I use this a lot when there's a lot of speed in the chord changes rather than positioning all 3. Now let's do this. Let's see. So it's a good method. I don't use it all the time, but I do use it sometimes. And then we have the 3-finger G, the standard one. Put this 1st finger, 2nd fret on that 2nd string down from the top. That's our standard 3-finger G. Now there's a lot of people that'll say, well, you can get some more flexibility if you change that around a little bit. So instead of using my 1st finger here, I'm going to use this as my 1st finger. Bring the 3rd finger over where that one was on the 3rd fret of the G string. And then my little finger now goes down here. So the finger's in their exact same position, except this finger now is free. That's kind of a common position there. Some people say you can switch between a C and a G a little bit faster when you do that. And so I haven't used that. I just started messing with it. I have to do it there, every once in a while. There's a song that requires that chord, and I have to do it this way. Can't get it any other way. So there's your 3-finger. Now we got a 4-finger G. Okay, and here what we're going to do is I'm going to take this finger and I'm going to bring that up to the 2nd string, the B string. Then I'll bring my little finger down where that was. And I always thought this had to have a different name because you're adding this other note here. You know, before it was open. That's adding a different note, right? But still it's called G for some reason. That's your 4-finger G. And if you bring these 2 fingers back and forth in the same position, you can actually get a C out of it, or a C9 anyway. So that's the 4-finger G. So you don't have, I'm just giving you exposure here. It's not like, oh, you need to learn all these. I mean, eventually you do, but maybe that's 2-3 years down the road, okay? Or the song demands it, okay? That's the other thing. But don't worry about it. I have to learn all these things. I just want to give you some exposure. You kind of choose how you want to approach it. But again, the standard G is this way, or use that 2nd finger. Do one of those 2. Okay, so let's see. Yeah, so those are your standard open G chords. Okay, the next one is an A. So hopefully you're familiar with this one. The standard one is 3 fingers in a row, and those start with the 3rd string down from the top, and looks like this. It's a little bit tough for a lot of people because this 1st finger here is quite a ways away from the fret, and sometimes you can get some buzzing out of that. So what I do is I take my index finger and then I go in between those 2, and then I put these 2 fingers on the other side of it. So I got the same 3 in a row, but that 1st finger is in the center, and I've kind of split it with the 2 fingers. You find that this is what I normally use. And then I also use a 1-finger A. And again, that's for speed purposes. So in that little thing I was just doing here, I'm using 1-finger A. This is the angle I normally have it at. It depends on your fingers. I have a hard time doing it this way. So this way feels the most comfortable for me. And you don't have to know that right off the bat either. I mean, learn the standard A first and then kind of move on. Okay, so that's the A chord. Well, then the 6th chord is a B minor. And a B minor is formed by taking an A minor, if you're familiar with that. Except I'm going to use my 2nd finger here because I want to free up this finger for the bar. So there's my A minor. I got this freed up for the bar. And if you can't see it too clearly, then the 2nd finger here is on the 2nd string, on the B string, on the 1st fret, and then the next 2 are the next 2 strings this way, the G and the D string, and they're in the 3rd fret. So if I want a B minor, I just slide up to the 2nd fret, and there's my B minor. Similar to, remember we had the F sharp minor, and I put these 2 fingers on the E minor, and I slid that up to get that chord. B minor is really common in the key of D. I see it all the time in the key of D. Very common. I don't see E minor too much, but I have seen that. And then the F sharp minor, you'll see that too, but not as often. Now the 7th chord in this case is well, I guess on the it's really a C. It's a diminished chord, and we're not going to worry about it. So we don't really have to mess with that now. But it's rarely used. I can't say that I've ever even used any of the diminished chords so far. So we won't worry about that now. So there's all of the chords that you see in the key of D, and you might say, you know, what difference, what key, why does that even matter? It matters for singing primarily and ease of playing. So as an example, I did my first lesson in the key of G. The key of G has one bar chord, B minor. That's the only bar chord it has. Now you notice in this one, I got two bar chords. I've got this F sharp and I've got the B minor. Those two minors. So in a song that has some speed, in your case, well, certainly in mine, excuse me, I might not be able to form that chord fast enough in the exchange, or I might not be able to sing in that key. So by changing it to a different key gives me the ability to determine, do I want to play it in, what key do I want to play it in? So let's take a practical example. So let's just say there's a song by the Beatles, for lack of another better example. And that key is, let's just say it's in the key of D. And I can't sing it. I just can't sing it. Or I'll have to lower one whole octave my voice. So here's an octave. That's one whole octave. So when you think about it, very few people can sing like the Beatles because they're all almost soprano guys. They're certainly tenors or soprano. So to be able to sing that, what I've done for years is to change the key so I can sing it. Or I might change it from another key to the key of G as an example, because it's easier for me to play that, because my main chords are just G, D, and C, and maybe I like those better than, as an example, key of F. F, B flat, and C. Much more difficult to get those two bar chords in the majors, and that's hard to make fast changes. So that's the two reasons that you might be concerned about what the key is. And the other point is we call it transposing. And transposing means I can take the note, the chord progression, whatever the chord progression happens to be. Let's just say it's D, G, A, B minor as an example. I can look on a chart, like this number chart here, and say, okay, well, what if I wanted to change it to C? And then I would just go down the line and change C to the one chord, and then just count out, and then those would be the chords, so I can determine whether or not that would be easier for me to sing or easier for me to play, or both, and that happens. So there you go. It's kind of an introduction to the key of D major, and hopefully you got something out of this lesson. So take it easy out there. We'll see you next time. Keep on strumming.